To be or not to be? That is ever the question. But like most things that gain international ubiquity, the words, or rather those words, cease to signify anything beyond their mere familiarity. But rather than asking what to do or if some hypothetical is wont to occur or not, our boy Hamlet is asking whether he should live. For to be in the most fundamental sense is to live, is to wonder. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep. No more, and by asleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes? But that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. Established in being, perform action. Now that, such is the exhortation of Lord Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the great sacred texts of the Vedic tradition, when Krishna teaches the reluctant soldier to meditate on the field before battle. For not to belabor a hackneyed metaphor, but what is life to many moderns but a battle against nature, sometimes each other, most often ourselves? Or must it be so? Why this constant friction, fight, fear? I do not deny the state of the world. It's not ideal. But there are enough pundits amongst the chattering classes to comment on all that, and such ceaseless commenting doesn't seem to get us anywhere. Beyond the specific here and now, we must come to see life as a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we expect the best, such will come. If we think of failure, that's what will follow suit. If we're constantly battling dragons of what if and what will, then if and will duly follow. Some contend they need such friction to stimulate them to work, to achieve. But what if do less, accomplish more wasn't a myth, but a practical, livable axiom? We know from neuroscience, starting with Nobel Prize winner Sir John Eccles, that man uses approximately 2% of his brain at any given moment for any given task. 2%. That is not, my dear friends, a lot. We know that meditation, that is tapping into being rather than analytical thought and aggrandizing our sense of who and what we are in the world, increases brain coherence. That is to say, meditation creates more synaptic connection. A synapse, for those that don't recall, is at the basic level a junction between two nerve cells consisting of a small gap which neurotransmitters traverse, thereby coordinating impulses and thusly thoughts and actions in the brain. The more our synapses fire, the more our brain is working. The more creativity flows and solutions emerge. We know from fMRI scans of the brain in meditation that meditation increases synaptic connections, or what scientists also call brain coherence. Science has also illuminated that 90% of our attention at any given time is most often concerned with past stresses, something cognitive scientists call precognitive commitments. This is to say, if you were stung by a bee while eating an orange as a child, the smell or sight of an orange can, decades later, trigger a low-grade stress response in your system. So if 90% of our attention is concerned with these unconscious stressors, we're essentially in, at bare minimum, low-grade fight or flight all day long. And that's to say nothing of the larger, more ostensible salient stressors which inevitably surface. So think about the fact that you have thousands of these PCCs abiding in you. It's no wonder that 90% of our time and energy is consumed by merely pacifying stimuli, triggering old embedded memories. Seemingly innocuous stressors abound, leaving little time for actual pure being. There was a time, however long ago, that you and I and everybody we know had no such baggage, no such albatrosses around our necks. Such was a time, however brief, when creative intelligence ruled the day, rather than fear, anxiety, and self-imposed limitations. A time when you could just be. But more often in our virtual wasteland, in the age of digital reproduction, where simulacra rule the day and avatars increasingly replace Roman numerals in so-called communication, the average person is more undead than she is alive, more mindlessly doing rather than pure being. So we come to echo, usually less eloquently, what Hamlet first captured in his Act 2 epistle to man, here reflected in song as sung in the musical Hair. I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth. This goodly frame, the earth seems to me a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you. This pale o'erhanging firmament, this majestical roof, fretted with golden fires, why it appears no other thing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action how like an angel, in apprehension how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. So often, though, like Hamlet, we know that so-called beauty exists in the world, but somehow sense, or rather resign ourselves to the notion that it is not for us. But must Hamlet's bleak purview, which unfortunately is all too familiar, define the status quo of our own stories? If life is a self-fulfilling prophecy, how does one alchemize the stale promontory into the hanging gardens of Babylon? I resolve, friends, that it is not through doing. Surely not doing alone. I think of doing as the behavioral equivalent of medieval alchemy. For just as one cannot transform lead to gold with mere hocus pocus, so too one cannot pursue object-oriented fulfillment or the distraction of ever being busy or worried or doing to transform the ache, the ennui, the fear, most often of death, into anything more than something from which we perpetually try to escape but never quite do. We cannot force genius or control the timeline. Sometimes the important doing is not doing. Common sense and basic observation tells us that even the best rat racers ultimately burn out. Historical mythos holds that Michelangelo would lay for days envisioning what he might paint before he officially scored the Sistine Chapel with the epic we've come to hail as one of Western art's finest achievements. Ram Dass, the great spiritual teacher of the 60s, who just left us in December, became an icon, and for good reason, by exhorting us to be here now. But what no one asks, or yet all seem to know, or assume to know, is what the hell being is. I've already alluded to it myself too many times for its being such a nebulous notion. Those who invoke being assume it's some fundamental common concept all humans have or understand. But just because something is natural and organic doesn't mean that domesticated humans transitioning to life ever increasingly online have any real connection to this purportedly natural phenomena. So I beg you, what is being? If this were a test, what would you scribble down? I do believe we all know what being is. That is, we have a sense memory of it in our visceral bodies. But like Derrida, the French intellectual charlatan to some, or social provocateur to others, would say, I cannot tell you what it is, but I can tell you what it is not. So likewise, it is futile to try to define the ineffable, the implicitly understood, that which cannot be known, only directly experienced, talked about, but not directly. But if I'm going to exalt being as this thing that we should all cultivate and pursue, well, I have to then at least attempt or provide some parameters. So let the process of elimination begin. Being is not a mood. It is not a physical place, yet it can be a place inside oneself, a place where thoughts cease and cosmic connection abounds. And lest you dismiss me as a hippy-dippy, which of course I am, let me remind you that cosmic merely means vast or comprehensive. It has not been trademarked or copyrighted to be the sole verbal domain of LA wellness influencers peddling rose quartz and sage. Being is both abstract and concrete. Being is presence when one doesn't try to be present, doesn't attend to the moment because the moment is lived rather than thought about. Being is something cultivatable, paradoxically through technique. Full disclosure, I subscribe to a very particular form of meditation, which is my overarching technique for cultivating being, Vedic Meditation. The ancient practice of systematic, sustainable stress release, which frees the nervous system from the shackles of stress, fatigue, and fear, so to allow infinite adaptability and creative intelligence to emerge. It's like a house renovation. You clear out the old to make way for the new. Fuller disclosure, I also teach this practice. And whether you learn it or not, or develop any kind of contemplative practice, what I aim to provide today is a better notion of what being is, all the while affirming that it cannot be comprehensively defined, only experienced. For me, the highest expression of self is the state of human merely being. So much so that I call my teaching and artistic practice, colloquially, human merely being. The cosmic, or rather Karakapa dictionary, defines the term thusly. Human merely being, noun. The natural, simple state of living attainable to Homo sapiens, free of obfuscations resulting from accumulated daily stress. Human merely being, adverb. A matter of blissful embodied living whereby one's innate joy brings fulfillment to all she does rather than objects or things outside of herself providing fulfillment or purpose. The state of non-seeking where one copacetically exists in pure possibility, full adaptability, and cosmic awareness. Human merely being, as I see it, is our birthright. A birthright that's, quote, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. As the king of modern poetry, T.S. Eliot wrote in his final, Vedically inspired masterpiece, Four Quartets. In other words, it's a birthright we have a future memory of, quasi-recognized from moments of flow in the precipice between waking and sleeping. Yet through simple practice, one can cultivate the seed into a fully bloomed inner paradise that sustains the slings and arrows of the external wilderness that we experience as the world. In cultivating being, one releases stress, resets physiologically, and gains innumerable practical physical benefits. Full list and peer-reviewed studies available upon request. If such alone compels you, bravo, for this too is our birthright, to be rested, primed for action, capable and capacious in any and all endeavors. Yet the true gift that transcends specific purpose or gain is relearning how to thrive in the world as we did before the great forgetting. How to, paraphrasing Eliot again, quote, return to the beginning and know the place of infinite possibility for the first time. This is what I teach. Vedic meditation, and more broadly what I practice in art and life, or at least hope to. Art, music, writing, theater, movement, even the cultivation of personal aesthetics has always been a spiritual practice for me, so much so that I cannot fathom separating them. Art is the confrontation of self via the artistic medium, so to say something both terrestrial and celestial about and beyond oneself. Close your eyes. Whatever being means to you, be that. Did you have thoughts while you were being? Probably. Perchance not, but probably. Being, contrary to popular belief, doesn't mean shushing your mind. It doesn't mean telling the mind, nevermore shall you think while we be. For with practice and technique, one can eventually come to think and be simultaneously. That kind of being which pervades any and all activity is our true transcendent nature, which is often drowned out by the fever pitch of our thinking, our mindless doing, our so-called living. To harmonize thought and being so that they can coexist peacefully takes time, takes technique for those of us, namely all of us, who have forgotten. When being is forgotten, so too is beauty, and thereby, paradoxically, our connection to the transcendent. Now close your eyes again and conjure up the most beautiful music, painting, poem, any piece of art that moves you. Whatever stirs in you, whatever was and has been moved, this is being connecting you to the metaphysical through beauty, through art. Art in this rudimentary sense is a small snapshot of the total joy and bliss that stabilized being can afford you. For atheist and theist alike can be compelled by Mozart's Fourth Symphony or Rilke's poetry, and it is the inner stirring of being through beauty that is the essence of the transcendent, the bridge to something beyond oneself, even if that other self is just our highest self of earthly form. Leonard Bernstein, in his vast, ridiculously ambitious lecture series, The Unhithered Question, given as the Norton Lectures at Harvard in 1973, played with many ideas. Chomsky linguistics' pedestrian approach to musical analysis, music as an international poetics versus prose, always progressive and very interdisciplinary. In an intellectual sea of pearls, the pièce de résistance is Bernstein's simple assertion that art, in any form, because it conjures up the pre-linguistic, reverts us to a mode of operating that is based out of visceral response rather than rational thought, that this is the very essence of metaphysics and transcendental experience. When we step beyond thought, our senses literally, physically come more alive. Taste, touch, hearing, seeing, all sharpen. With deeper, more accurate sensory perception, the world opens up, plays in technicolor as we come to vibrantly inhabit a present we can palpably sense rather than intellectually race through. When we step beyond thought, so to fully awaken to life's physical stimuli, we can finally rest. From deep rest flows great possibility. 20 minutes of Vedic meditation in particular has been shown to be 5 times more restful than 5 hours sleep, because it's impossible for the body to physically purge its accrued stress through sleep alone. For such purging requires a different brainwave and psychophysical state than sleep provides. So what's the end game of cultivating being, be it through meditation or glimpsed at through artistic experience, or ideally both? A body devoid of stress. One can that more fully, easily house bliss, joy, motivation, and clarity. A body that can have thoughts, but knows it is not only its thoughts. It is fundamentally something much more cosmic, broad, wide, and universal than just the inner chatter. Besides, stress is a drag, and more perniciously, it destroys our ability to believe in the world, to believe in beauty, to believe in creative intelligence. To believe in creative intelligence's ability to inspire manifest solutions to seemingly impossible things. It isn't surprising to me that JFK, the president who saw America put a man on the moon, was so close a friend of Bernstein's. He was the only president who seemed to really recognize the arts as an integral piece for the health of any great society. The man who founded the Kennedy Center, not our most prestigious, but certainly our most federal and official of performing arts venues. This man would ask Bernstein himself to consecrate the space with a work so visionary, so far-reaching and genre-defying that it can only be described as an American mid-century modern Gesamtstückewerk, a fusion of the arts. Bernstein's Mass, which he called a theater piece for singers, dancers, and players, required some 200 plus performers, and I could do a whole chit-chat on Mass. But suffice it to say, Mass, while made to open the Kennedy Center, was actually intended for the people. Bernstein really wanted it performed more in community centers than concert halls, as it harkened back to this Aristotelian ideal of theater as cathartic, communal release, a chance for the collective to gather around an edifying cause. Because in Bernstein's own words, I believe in the potential of people. I cannot rest passively with those who give up in the name of human nature. Human nature is only animal nature if it is obliged to remain static. Without growth, without metamorphosis, there is no Godhead. If we believe that man can never achieve a society without wars, then we are condemned to wars forever. This is the easy way. But the laborious, loving way, the way of dignity and divinity, presupposes a belief in people and in their capacity to change, to grow, to communicate, and love. I believe in man's unconscious mind, the deep spring from which comes his power to communicate and to love. For me, all art is a combination of these powers. For if love is the way we have of communicating personally in the deepest way, then what art can do is to extend this communication, magnify it, and carry it to vastly greater numbers of people. Therefore, art is valid for the warmth and love it carries within it, even if it be the lightest entertainment, or the bitterest satire, or the most shattering tragedy. End quote. This reminds me of a very favorite Noel Coward song, a few lines in particular where the character confesses a sense of resignation and sadness about being what she considers to be only amusing, yet never being taken seriously. Which is to say that laughter, comedy, so-called lowbrow art, if it makes us feel connection, can be as valid, if not more, than something Wagnerian. The ditty goes, I believe in doing what I can, in crying when I must, in laughing when I choose. Hey ho, if love were all, I should be lonely, but I believe that since my life began, the most I've had is just a talent to amuse. Hey ho, if love were all. So whether the work makes you laugh or cry, as Bernstein concludes, we must learn to know ourselves better through art. We must rely more on the unconscious, inspirational side of man. We must not enslave ourselves to dogma. We must believe in the attainability of good. We must believe without fear in people. End quote. Whether it's returning to the ballet bar daily or the art studio, creative practice, like meditation, requires a confrontation of self. The good, the bad, the ugly, the repressed, the glorious, the inherited. So through technique and time, we come to slay the dragon, inner and outer, that prevented us from seeing it was a princess in disguise all along. To jettison the stories and excuses holding us back from joy unfettered, inner contentedness deriving from nowhere but everywhere, not from a thing, but from all things, which is every human merely being's birthright. In meditation, we plant the seed and watch it blossom into being, rife with the fruits of bliss and abundant joy. So we've defined human merely being as this cosmic cowgirl sees it, but not actually acknowledge why I insist on calling it such. Why not just being, just human being? Well, before I had a mantra to meditate with, as the Vedic practice is a mantra-based one, I had a poetic mantra, a poem I would say each morning before I sat, or rather squirmed, to meditate in a non-Vedic style. At the time, I found the poem more profound and impactful than my fledgling practice, since my practice at the time didn't offer much structure towards cultivating the transcendent quality and stabilizing it in my daily life. At the time, I thought it was ironic that a poem provided me more daily relief and inspiration than my so-called meditation. Yet many years and many proper meditations later, I don't think it's ironic at all. It's only natural. For poetry, especially this one, as you'll see, derives from nature, and nature, like art, is the other portal to the transcendent. After all, where did Emerson and Thoreau go off to? The woods, back to nature. So this paean, by my poetic father, dear E.E. Cummings, captured what I would eventually come to know as the experience of full-embodied being that has become the motivating force and ultimate aim of all I do and seek to share. The original source of how I came to think about source. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and the blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human, merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. Some may find this poem too precious, too spiritual, too much the domain of airy fairies. But I find the invocation of synesthesia, the embrace of the abstract and cosmic, manifest in the specificity of nature to be prescient and on point. We are simple, foibled humans who are merely being, and we are also creatures who can only hope to simply be. To live with senses fully awake to the world we inhabit, so to accurately, playfully, fearlessly, and lovingly create and evolve. We can gratefully greet another day or bitterly curse it. Personally, I'd prefer to do the former. Just as we can memorize and thereby internalize a poem or credo, so too we can practice being through technique, cultivate being with effortless ease, and over time, find that simple human merely being comes to provide the backdrop for daily living, for the play of life. For unbounded being is a practice, and as with all such things, all that we practice we become. Life is an art, and human merely being, that is, being alive rather than merely being undead, that is a choice we make each and every morning.